Hey, welcome to session 3 of Discipleship Launch, how to create a discipleship culture in your local church. My name is Daryl Stetler, and like I said, this is session 3. It is talking about how to double the number of disciples in your church this year, all right? Now, you've only got 6 months left, but I think that there are specific actions you can take that'll make that possible. I am super excited to be sharing this. This is the 3rd video out of 4, and I'm getting so many comments. The video from last time, I think the most comments I've ever got, or most emails I've ever gotten, people replying and saying, hey, thank you for this content. This is helpful. So glad to be helpful. I'm a small church guy myself. And so I have such appreciation and respect for what a lot of you small church pastors do out there. And I want to be helpful. I deeply, deeply want to be helpful to you in that whole process. And so my name is Daryl. I've got a wife and 7 kids. I am a small church pastor myself for the last 21 years in Oklahoma City at this little brick church right here. We grew from 12 people our very first Sunday, kind of a church restart, and we made some progress over the years. And as we made that progress, I made a bunch of mistakes. I would like to think that I have learned from them a little bit. And I just want to tell you that when the church got larger, as the church got larger, it made it more difficult to design a discipleship process. For instance, at that point of our church, it became like, I just don't have time. You know, the load just feels too heavy to be able to create a discipleship process. I can't take time off and build something, a conveyor to move people forward. But I definitely thought about like this. I don't have time to build it, but I definitely have time to feel guilty about it, right? So maybe you're in that situation. If you are, I think I can tell you how to make progress on this, okay? So I'm a practitioner. I'm not a theorist in an ivory tower somewhere. I'm a guy who's doing this stuff on a regular basis, and I think I can help you. We can help each other move forward toward a better, more intentional disciple-making process. So today I'm answering some of the top questions that I get. And then one of the top questions that I get is this: how can I get people interested in being discipled? How can I get people interested? It seems like they're just lackadaisical, or they're kind of apathetic. They're not really wanting to hear. And how am I supposed to get people interested in that? Great question. George Barna did some research and asked a couple of thousand people. He asked them the question, why are you not involved in discipleship? He took a bunch of people who were not being discipled, and he said to them, why are you not being discipled? And the answers that they gave broke down like this. 29% of them said they've never considered being discipled. I just never thought about it, you know. I don't think I've ever really considered that. 25% said they don't think they need to be discipled, all right? So 25% say, 1 out of 4 says they don't think they need to be discipled. And then 14% of Christians say that no one has ever invited them to be discipled. So now that we kind of got the lay of the land, and like that's the status of things, that's the state of things. In fact, Barna's report, which you can purchase online if you care to, I've purchased it and read it, is the state of discipleship. And so how are we going to respond? Like as pastors, what are we going to do to respond to the common objections that people have that keep them from being interested? When you ask people, they answer that way. Well, let's talk about it, right? So here's response points, okay? So number 1, the truth is you're going to need a clear discipleship pathway, not a guessing game. You're going to need a clear discipleship pathway, not a guessing game. So the reason that, the number 1 reason that people give for not being a part of discipleship is that they haven't thought about it. And the reason that they haven't thought about it, I would argue, is that nobody has asked them. Nobody has really confronted them with the need for that. We've been so interested in salvation, and we've made justification, forgiveness, the good news, and discipleship and holiness, the irrelevant news, right? And so we've got to bring those two back together again. So one of them actually is the fruit of the other one, right? So that discipleship is the natural fruit, and we've got to bring that to people so they don't just think about salvation as a set of, eternal fire insurance that they can take or leave. It's a nice spiritual option, discipleship, but I hadn't really thought about it. So yeah, we're going to have to deal with that. So a lot of the pastors of those churches, this is something I want to point out to you. A lot of the pastors of those churches where people just haven't thought about it, probably that they've never considered it. probably those pastors thought they had been clear. But there's an old saying that I heard a few years ago. It said, if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the pew. Right? If it's just a little misty in the pulpit, it's not super clear to you, I guarantee it's not clear at all for the people. It's not suddenly and inexplicably getting clearer in the pew if you're not clear. And so you're going to have a clear discipleship pathway, not a guessing game on whether or not on how to enter discipleship and what the pathway looks like. You're going to need to decide, what do I want new Christians to do first? What do I want them to do after that? What do I want them to do after that? I'm actually going to talk about a lot about that in the 4th video coming up, so I'll spend more time on that when it comes to designing that pathway, okay? So make sure you're here for that one. And by the way, if you hear something you like, put it down in the comments. Like say amen or say yes, I agree, or something down in the comments, right? So I know you're watching. Secondly, I wanted to say that you need a clear entrance and call to action. A clear entrance and a call to action. So this is not about your pathway. This is about your doorway and your invitation to that doorway. So a lot of times, have you ever seen these secret bookshelves? I have this aspiration that someday in the new heavens and the new earth, I will have a secret bookshelf room, right? Where you pull one of those books and it clicks and the door swings open and you have a secret library or a secret room behind your bookshelf. That would be amazing. I always thought as a kid that would be spectacular. I don't have one, but if you did have one, sometimes that's the only way that you get into discipleship at some churches. Like the entrance is hidden behind, it's tucked in back somewhere on the back side of the church property. And they're like, oh, how do you enter discipleship? Yeah, you get on the shuttle bus and you go that way for like 30 minutes. And that's not the way it ought to work, right? Instead, your entrance to discipleship should look like this. I mean, you don't want to bury it behind a secret bookshelf. You want to make it big and wide with a blast of music and spotlights on it and like red carpet and, flashing giant arrows around it. You want it to be so abundantly crystal clear how people can get involved that it's just not able to be missed. That's what you're looking for as a pastor. So so how do you do that? Well, you're going to have to create calls to action. You're going to have to create a clear invitation, and you're going to have to create a clear entry point, like some sort of tool. So this is what I do at our church, and this is the New Start Discipleship Journal. You can download it for free if you want on my website. newstartdiscipleship.com, and so check that out. But it's you got to have something, right? You got to have some way where it's like people can raise their hand and say, "I'm in," and you have to have a clear call to action to say, "It's time to move that way," right? All right. So number 3, let's talk about number 3. Third way of responding is you're going to need to lead from the pulpit. Okay, so preaching. Now, I will talk more about this in a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but there's got to be preaching. What the pulpit doesn't make an issue soon becomes a non-issue for anyone and everyone, all right? So you've got to decide that you're going to lead from the pulpit. Number four, you're going to have to ask people privately. You're going to have to ask people privately. There's always going to be some people, okay? There's going to be some people who don't hear the invitation for them. They don't hear it as for them. They hear it as for other people. Always. I don't care how clear you are. There's always going to be people like that. And so a lot of times you have to go to them and have a private conversation, a personal conversation where you are recruiting or someone is doing that within your church. There's going to have to be actual conversations where you do that. So you're going to have to make those 4 things happen. And when you can put those 4 pieces together, they form this powerful concoction that catalyzes interest within your congregation on discipleship. So the pulpit is leading, you're asking people privately, and there's a clear entrance and a clear pathway. Suddenly it's like, oh, this is a thing. And now people are able to be interested in that. Obviously, there's a spiritual component to that, and God has to draw their hearts and challenge their hearts. But let's be honest, God uses the power of the Holy Spirit through conversations and through preaching and through clarity to do that, through invitation, right? So that's the way to get people interested in discipleship in your church. Don't just preach a sermon that beats them up and says, you ought to be out here getting discipled. Instead, preach a clear and compelling message about why the Bible talks about it, and then invite them to a very ultra clear next step. All right? Now, let's talk about the second big question that I get, okay? Let's talk about the second big question, and that is, how can I get someone else to be a disciple maker? How can I get someone else to be a disciple maker? So, when we're talking about doubling, right, now this is what this is about. When we're talking about doubling the number of people in a discipleship program. If you're at one person right now, you can go to 2 by adding. But if you're going to go from 2 to 4 or 4 to 8, you're going to need to multiply, right? There comes a point where you can't do all that disciple making anymore. You will fry your brain and you will run out of time. And plus, it's just not what the Spirit asks and what what Christ has asked of us anyway, right? The better model is what Paul said, the things you've heard from me, give to other faithful men who are able to teach others also. 4 generations of discipleship there in 2 Timothy 2:2. All right. So multiplying is the next thing we need to talk about. So the old saying, better is he that can get 10 men to work than he that can do the work of 10 men. Right? And that's true. So getting other people to make disciples. So this is a real thing for me. It's what I'm working on right now. I literally have 2 meetings in the next week with guys that I'm talking to about becoming disciple makers. And I'm working on getting that where it's clear in my communication and my ability to multiply and give connections to those guys where that becomes really, really clear. And so that's to me is a really exciting phase, a really exciting stage where that's the problem that we're trying to work with. So luckily, Barna has done some research on this as well. So this is more statistics from that same Barna report, The State of Discipleship. So why are Christians not making disciples? Let's talk about that and the 3 barriers to disciple-making congregations. All right, so why are they not doing it? Here's the reasons that Barna's research uncovered. He asked 1,643 adults who were not making disciples why they weren't making disciples. Okay, so he asked them why, and here's what they said. Number 1 answer at 37% was, I don't think I'm qualified to be a disciple maker. I don't think I'm qualified to be a disciple maker. Now, that's really hard news, right? Because it means that that person doesn't feel equipped. They don't feel like they have the tools necessary. Secondly, by the way, I'm going to tell you in a minute why all these are actually good news, okay? Secondly, no one has suggested it. No one suggested it. Nobody has asked me to be a disciple maker. And then thirdly, 22%, almost 1 in 4, I just haven't thought about being a disciple maker. I just really haven't thought about it. Now, those 3 things are the top 3 reasons that people give. And I want you to understand that there's buried good news in that. Let me tell you what the good news is. The good news is you can solve all those problems. You can literally solve and take away the top 3 excuses people give for not making disciples. Like, those are all within your power to change. That's incredible news. So let's talk about solving the 3 biggest problems, all right? What are we going to do? Let me talk to you about how to solve I'm not qualified. I don't feel qualified, all right? So if people feel like some task or project is deeply complex or requires significant skills or equipment that they don't have, they will just avoid that because they don't feel like they're qualified to do it. And you already know this, right? Like if you are a welder, if you're not a welder, you will avoid welding. Even if you have something around your house that you could fix by welding it. I have some things around my house that I could fix by welding it, but I'm not a welder. I've done a little bit, but I'm not a welder. And I don't have a welder, and so a lot of people, they're not a welder, they don't have the equipment, and they've never been shown how to use it. 37%, don't miss this, 37% of people who are not making disciples are feeling exactly like that about not making disciples. Right? That's what they're feeling. So this is really good news because it means if you could give someone the equipment and show them how to use it and take the mystery out of it, all of a sudden you would remove, don't miss this, you would remove the excuse that 37% of Christians use for not making disciples. You would take that excuse away, and there would be no longer the thing they say most frequently wouldn't be there. What if you could get a bunch of that 37% of Christians? What if you could get a bunch of them involved in making disciples for the very first time? Would it unleash in your church and in the kingdom of God, would it unleash a powerful stream of disciple makers? Yes, it would. If you could take away that excuse and empower people. So how are you going to do that? Well, I can solve that problem for you through New Start Discipleship. So one of the things that I do is I created this so that this New Start Discipleship pathway, which is actually more than just one thing, it's a whole pathway that would let you be able to spend 1 to 2 years with a brand new convert and fully get them established. And what I do with this is I decided that I was done trying to make disciples and then finding out that I couldn't multiply that. And let me explain what I mean by that. I was winging it every time and trusting in my own gifts. And the reason was because I could wing it every time. I'm not a bad talker. I like discussion time. I like questions, and I love Jesus and the Bible, and I like people. And so I have a spiritual gift of teaching, and I don't have a hard time teaching. And I'm perfectly comfortable answering questions. And I've been to Bible college for a few years, and I was raised in a pastor's home, and I have a ridiculous memory for questions and quotes and Bible verses. So all of those things together, I was trusting in my own proprietary mix of gifts and experience. And that's the system I was using to make disciples. And so consequently, when I got done, people never would feel like they could do that because they weren't Daryl, right? They weren't me. They didn't have my gifts. They didn't have my background. They didn't have my comfort level with that. And so it was me that was the bottleneck. I was the problem. I couldn't multiply because I was winging it every time, trusting in my own gifts. So what I decided to do was take a different tack and say, I'm going to offload some of the process and create a crystal clear process for people as to how they could exactly what to have people read, exactly what and the habits that you want them to develop, right, and build a habit-forming journal, which is what the New Start Discipleship Journal is, and then take the teaching load by giving them a QR code to a video where I teach what that day's Bible reading means, right? And I do that again with the second round, which is the Obedience Challenge, a 90-day Gospels Bible reading plan. I'm going to show you the rest of this in the next video, but I just want you to understand that this is a really something I've thought a lot about, because I don't want people in my church to go around forever not feeling qualified. I want them to be able to take somebody. I want to be able to grab a copy of this right here. Somebody prays to receive Christ. I want to be able to bring them in and say, hey, Bob, come here. This is Bill. Bill just prayed to become a Christian. And Bill, welcome to the family. We're so excited and for what God is doing in your life. That's fantastic. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you this New Start Discipleship Journal. It's a 50-day Bible reading plan, shows you exactly what to read. And I'm going to give this to you, and I'm going to connect you with Bob. All right? Bob has actually been through this journal. And so Bob is going to be your biggest encourager. He's going to be your go-to guy. He's going to text you once or twice, maybe 3 times a week, and just check in and see how you're doing. If you have questions, I want you to shoot them to Bob. And Bob's going to take you out for coffee or lunch or something, or have you over on Sunday afternoon or a Friday evening once a week for the next 3 months. And just to get you started right and get you connected and make sure that you are really making progress on your walk with Jesus. Does that make sense? Like, I just did an elevator pitch right there. Like, it's like the short little pitch for do you think that makes Bob feel more empowered and more confident in knowing exactly what he can do and exactly how to walk forward with this? And if he doesn't know the answer to the question, he can reach out to me. That's fine. Frankly, he can do some research, not going to hurt him, right? But he doesn't any longer feel unqualified because there is a crystal clear pathway. And all he has to do is worry about staying in contact and being a huge encouragement. I think that's marvelous because it takes all the mystery right out of the whole process. It takes the fog out of it and puts handles on making disciples. All right, so I hope you can tell that I am super, super excited about that. Number 2, all right, let's talk about number 2. How to solve no one has ever suggested it to me, all right? This is really simple. It's really simple. You got to ask people, right? You got to ask people. And I don't mean just preach on it. Okay, you do have to preach on it. And I think you should, and I want you to email me and ask or put down in the comments below you want the sermons on discipleship because I'm happy to share some of that with you. But you need to announce it. You just need to. It's got to happen. At our church, my staff member and I have a saying. And the saying is, personal recruitment works better than pulpit announcement. Have you found this to be true? Right? Like you can make announcements until you're blue in the face, but personal recruitment is way better. It's better to be like, well, it's if you were like, hey, we got this event, y'all should all come to it. It's on Friday night at 7:00. What would work better? Announcing that to everyone, or calling every single person in your church and say, hey, you gonna be at the thing on Friday night at 7? Which one would get more people there? I think we both know that the phone call would get more people there if it was like, or the face-to-face conversation. Why? Because personal recruitment works better than pulpit announcement. Now, obviously, you can't personally recruit everyone for everything in your church, and I'm not saying you should. But if making disciples is the core of the Great Commission, and it is, and if it is the ultimate goal of the church, and it is, then aren't we supposed to do what is most effective in that way? You're going to have to ask people. Now, the great thing is you can solve the reason that 27%, more than 1 out of 4 Christians said, this is why I haven't made disciples, is because no one has suggested it to me. Now, you can solve that. You can take away the excuse that 1 out of 4 people give for not making disciples. So that is very much it's well within your power. So I can help with that with New Start Discipleship, at least in 2 ways. One of them is preaching resources, and the other one's coaching, all right? So I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I can tell you, I can give you sermons on discipleship. Here's what I can't do. I can't make you, sitting right here, pull out your phone and text 5 people and say, hey, I just wanted to set an appointment with you to talk about a discipleship plan that I feel like God's putting on my heart. Could we get together in the next 10 days sometime and let me buy your coffee and let's talk about it? And then if they don't answer, bump them the next morning and say, just bumping this to the top of your inbox, smiley face. Right? You get the idea. So what if that's what you did? Now, the problem is that you'll probably forget that right after this video, right? So coaching becomes really, really important because a good coach will help you take the action steps you need to take. And that's the coaching difference, right? It really is. So let's talk next about number 3, all right? How to solve, I just haven't thought about it. So how do I solve, I just haven't thought about it? Well, here's the thing. People are busy and people are distracted, right? They are. Streaming services and YouTube and smartphone and life, right? Just life and kids and appointments and all the stuff. And I can guarantee you that the devil wants to make sure that people always, for 30 years, just don't think about it, right? He's got tools everywhere to make sure that they don't. The cares of this life choke out the seed of the word, right? Now, how do we fight against that? What in the world can we do? Well, here's the answer to that. The truth is that disciple making has to move to front and center for your church. Disciple making has to move front and center. It has to move to the core of what you do. The way you communicate, the way you structure, the way you budget, the way you think, the way you schedule, the way you converse, the way you announce, the way you preach. It's got to move to front and center. So how can we do that? Well, there's a lot of ways you could, right? But here's at least 4. I actually have more that I talk about in other places, but here's at least 4 of them today. And I'll talk about 4 ways to publicly communicate the priority of discipleship. All right, here they are. Number 1, make space for it physically. Make space for it physically. Now, what do I mean by making space for it physically? Well, did you know that Walmart actually blocks your way in their store? You ever notice those pallets that they put right in the middle of the aisle? And they stick them right in the middle of the aisle. You know why they do that? They do it because they want you to slow down. They discovered that if instead of leaving big wide open aisles, if they put certain things that are quick buys in those aisle things, you have to go around them. And when you have to go around them, it means you have to look at them. And when you look at them, you think, oh, I could use one of those, or my kids would like one of those, or yeah, I forgot I needed that. They arrange the physical space in such a way that you have to look at it. Now, here's what we do at our church, all right? Here's a little video clip that I want to show you. It's basically, here is right when you come in the front door of our church, here's our discipleship resource table. So there's this Your Discipleship Journey table cover that I designed. By the way, that's part of the New Start discipleship system. You get it if you get the design where you can order it for yourself. You don't have to design it yourself. And I put out all of those resources on that table because I want to visually represent exactly what I think discipleship should be and the way I want it to be at our church. I want people to know that this is not just something like, well, come to services one more time forever and ever, and that's what discipleship is. That's not what discipleship is. There is a journey of spiritual growth, of spiritual commitments that I want every single person in my church to have. I want them to have those commitments to obeying Christ's commands and knowing the Scripture and building habits of daily prayer and learning how to pray the Psalms and learning how to live out the one another commands and moving from me to we and how to be baptized in the baptism challenge and why they should be baptized and how to design a baptism testimony and lots more things that I can't even show you right now. So what I want people to do is I want them to be confronted immediately when they walk in like, oh, this is the priority of this church. This is what they're about right here in front of me. So that's one way to move discipleship front and center in your church to where you can't possibly get around that. And by the way, it makes for a fantastic entryway to discipleship because you can put that's big flashing arrows, right? And you can use it as a commitment space. You can use it as a place to sign up for something. You're like, hey, now that we finished the message today, if God is talking to you and He's like, you know what? It's your time. This is it. You need to go public with your faith. You've committed to Christ and you need to be baptized. Then you need to pick up a copy of the baptism challenge because we're having a baptism Sunday 3 weeks from now down at so-and-so's lake. All right, or whatever. We don't have one here like that here in Oklahoma City, but you get the idea. So there's very clear entrance and a clear pathway and makes it front and center in the middle of the church. You can make space for it physically. Number 2, is make space for it in the pulpit and announcement. In the pulpit and announcement. So the fact that those three things that Barna talked about, that they haven't thought about being discipled, 29%, and that 25% don't see the need for discipleship, and 14% nobody has asked them, that's mostly a leadership issue. It's mostly a preaching and conversations issue. It is. And so the great, amazing thing about that is that you have the power over that. You've got to decide that you're going to make space for it and be really, really clear about calling people to be disciples of Christ, not just put their behind in a seat every Sunday, right? All right, number 3, you got to make space for it in leadership meetings. Make space for discipleship in leadership meetings. It's one of the ways that you move discipleship to front and center in your church. Let me explain why that's the case. Because ultimately, the conversations that leadership has tend to rotate around and revolve around things that are actually not part of the mission. Like saving money is really wise, but it's not part of the mission. It's not. And, dealing with church insurance and things, it has to be done, but it isn't part of the mission. And so how do you move? You've got to move discipleship to the center of some leadership meetings. You've got to make space for it in the places where conversations happen among real church leaders. And I'm going to talk to you about church boards real quick. So the truth is that some church boards basically are controlling, they control purse strings, right? And that's what they do. They decide like the brand of toilet paper dispensers, but they don't necessarily wrestle with the issues of, are we making disciples? And that's not the way church leadership works. It's not. And so you've got to decide that I'm going to help my board members wrestle with the questions of how can we make disciples, as opposed to what color of carpet we're going to have next or whatever. Obviously you have to answer those questions. But maybe if you started your board meeting with 20 minutes of training. I'm going to do 20 minutes of training today. We're going to talk about this. If you want training, talk to me, because I'll definitely do that. I'll create some training materials. In fact, you can use these if you want. This is a little longer than 20 minutes, but you can use these and get them in front of your board, because these are valuable conversations to have, and it confronts people with a set of language. There was a time on my church board where I decided that I was kind of done with the way we related, right? And we had this conversation where I said, I can't do this any longer. I'm trying to make decisions, and then it feels like you're trying to shoot them all down. But I've read books on this topic, and nobody else here has read any of those books. So I'm going to require everybody on the board, we're going to read a book together, right? And I did. We brought the book in, we read the books together, and we discussed, we'd read a chapter, we'd come in having already read a chapter, and we discussed that chapter in our board meeting to start the board meeting off. Because it had a way of unifying our language to where suddenly it was like, and we were talking and using the same language for things. And it was incredibly valuable. So you got to learn how to do that sort of thing. Move it to front and center in discipleship, in leadership meetings. All right, move discipleship there. Number 4. All right, number 4. Make space for it in personal recruitment. I talked about this a while ago, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but it's just true. When was the last time that you personally reached out to someone and asked them, hey, I know that you're right with the Lord and you've expressed that you have faith in Christ for forgiveness of your sins, and I'm super, super thankful for that. But the next thing for you is discipleship, is learning how to walk with God and to follow and obey and imitate Jesus. I'd like to meet with you once a week and just have you go through a process with me that will train you to do that more effectively. Could we do that? End of elevator speech, right? So making space for it in personal recruitment. Let me give you a bonus one. All right, this is not even on your handout, I don't think. But how about making space for it on the church calendar? Like on the calendar. Calendar is sacred space, isn't it? It's like, oh, we got to be careful about this and this and this. What about ministry, about discipleship on the church calendar? Is there any way that you could put something like, is there an appointment? Is there a program? Is there a place where you talk about discipleship? What is that? All right, let me just give you that one. So think that one through. I actually talk more about it in the coaching program. Number 5, recruit a discipleship champion. Recruit a discipleship champion. It's not on my PowerPoint, so you're going to have to imagine the PowerPoint slide, okay? So recruiting a discipleship champion. What do I mean by that? I mean someone to help you promote discipleship within your church, right? Someone to help you promote discipleship within your church. So you know what makes recruiting it easier? If you have a really clear plan. And so I want to talk to you next time. I'll talk to you about how to do all of that in the next video. So the truth is, you have what I call a promotion reservoir, where you're like, oh, here's my promotion reservoir. I've got to get up and say, this is the best thing ever, and everybody should come to it. But after a while, your promotion reservoir can run kind of dry, right? And you're like, by the third announcement that everybody should come to because it's the best thing ever, your energy level starts to go down and people start checking out, right? So being able to have somebody else who has those key conversations that you've talked to and trained to be like, could you help promote discipleship in our church? And here's ways you can do that. If you could take these actions once a week, that would be amazing. And it would be a huge lift. And there would be, instead of me being the only person having conversations about discipleship, you would be having them too. It would make a huge difference. And we can just check in once a week, talk for 15 minutes on the phone and say, what conversations you've been having this week? What about this person? What about that person? Right? So having a clear plan makes it way easier to recruit a discipleship champion, which is one of the ways that you make space in your church. All right. So today, I just want to tell you this as I kind of transition to closing this out. I got maybe 10 minutes left. All right, here we go. I want to tell you that all of this can feel exhausting. Does it not? Like, that's a lot of good ideas, but man, I hear things and then I forget 90% of what it was I heard in like 72 hours, maybe 72 minutes. Yeah, that's true. There's always this huge gap, isn't there, between knowledge and action? There's this massive gap. We know things we should do, but we don't actually take the step. Why is that? Well, it's because we don't have coaching, right? And you and I both know, I'm just going to be totally honest with you, Pastor. The truth is, 6 months from now, you won't be doing anything any different unless you do something different. And I mean, shift over. You're going to be doing the same. You're going to stuck for the next 6 months unless you change the way you react to these things. And I want to encourage you to make the decision to invest in coaching. How can I actually do this? How can I actually do this? Well, here's the answer. I want to announce to you for the very first time, I've never talked about this to anyone, New Start Coaching Program. It's a New Start Discipleship Coaching Package. The 8 weeks of coaching helps you get up and running all the way from zero to or wherever you currently are. It gets you all the way to up and running. Let me show you everything that's included in it. So included in the coaching program, 8 weeks of coaching is onboarding and weekly coaching videos. So there's videos at the beginning to onboard you. Okay, here's what this means. Here's what's included. Let's overview real quick. Here's where we're going. Right? So onboarding videos and then weekly videos. Also, there are weekly action checklists from your coach. Now, what that means is that you'll get on Monday an email with a document that says, here's what I want you to do this week. Sometimes these projects feel so huge and overwhelming because we haven't taken the time to drill down the next action step we ought to take. And what if you had somebody who had already done that for you? It was like, if you'll take these actions, in 8 weeks, we'll be up and running 100%. I've never done this before, and I am super, super excited to do it because this year I decided I've got to build this out for people because I know that I can make a difference in their churches. I know that they can make a difference in the discipleship culture of their churches if they're just taking the right actions and moving forward. But I know you guys are overwhelmed, and I know you're busy, and I know you're bivocational sometimes, or you got families like I do, and it's a lot of work, right? So I want to be able to help. Coaching program includes also unlimited email access to coaches. You can email me. I will see that email, and I will respond to that email. I will get in touch with you. I will call, or I will text, or I will email, or I'll send you ideas. We will do this thing. You have unlimited access. If you run into a roadblock and you're like, I don't know what to do about this situation, what do you think? Reach out to me on email, and I will be back in touch with you very soon, and we'll figure out a pathway through that together. So the next thing is also weekly win reporting. So when you get things done and something's happening and people are responding and you get your first disciple, or you get your first 3 disciples, or you get your first discipleship champion, or you preach your first sermon series on discipleship, or you start announcing things, or you put your table in place, weekly wins, right? Weekly win reporting. When you get your first round of resources printed and put out in your church, or you hand out the first one, or somebody prays, you get a weekly win, right? And you get to share that. And in the process, we actually have every single week 2 weekly group Zoom check-ins. So you don't have to attend them, but I would definitely encourage it. And I want everybody who's here to attend them. And so 2 options every single week. There's 2 Zoom calls. They're scheduled, and they just happen, right? Every single week, I'm going to be on there. I'm going to be taking questions. You can check in and say, hey, just want to share this win with the group. Or you can check in and say, hey, here's something I'm struggling with. What do you think? And we can check in every single week. So 2 Zoom calls every single week just to check in and say, how's it going? Are you making progress? Where are you stuck? Where are you winning? All right. So a private Facebook group so that you can crowdsource ideas or share best practices or ask for prayer or share something encouraging. And so a private Facebook group, the only people on the Facebook group are people involved in New Start Discipleship Coaching. So I'm super, super excited to be able to share that with you as well. So like community, right? You're not doing this alone. Other pastors are doing it with you. Now, this New Start Discipleship program is actually, you say, how much does it cost and where is it available? Well, it actually isn't available yet. It is coming on Tuesday, 7 a.m. Central. The card is up and running, and you can purchase it. The principles behind the coaching plan, we just walk you through this real fast. It's really a 6-part process, a 6-step process, and those are plan, pray, preach, promote, personal recruitment, and persistence. Okay, so plan. You install the discipleship process. You get all this stuff up and running. You get your things going. You put your order in for materials at the local print shop or print them off on your local printer, your printer at home. And then number 2, pray. Ask God to draw people to discipleship, and we will do that together. Number 3 is preach. Plan and begin a sermon series on discipleship. Number 4 is promote. Raise the visibility of discipleship in your church. Number 5 is personal recruitment. Have key conversations. Number 6 is persistence. Go back and do it again. Right? So that's the 6 steps in the course of 8 weeks. And here's the thing that I want you to understand. Look, if you don't have it up and running, I'll give you another 8 weeks or I'll give you your money back. All right? Money back guarantee. So make it possible for you to have an up and running full discipleship program installed in your church. All right? You can install all of this in an 8-week process and have it up and running. The truth is, I'm going to have to shut down New Start Discipleship sales. And here's why. I'm only one guy. And I run this entire show by myself with a couple of my teenage kids helping me with some of the tasks, right? And they're not going to be your coach. I am. And so I have a limited number of slots. I can't do this with everyone. I can't. It's as much as I would wish that I could do it with my whole list, I can't do it with 5,000 people. I would break in half, right? It would not be possible. So I'm gonna shut down sales at 100 pastors. Okay, that's all I can work with. So this process right here is going to mean that I've actually got to shut down New Start Discipleship sales for a period of time, and you won't be able to subscribe to New Start Discipleship because I want to give all of my attention for a period of time to getting this thing going and being like, okay, how can I help these pastors? How can I come alongside you? How can I make it feel like you've got a team member? You got somebody who's with you 100%, and we're here. I'm here. We're making the phone calls. We're jumping on a Zoom call. We're figuring it out on email. We're getting together on the Facebook group. I want to make sure that you understand that this process, I am utterly committed to making sure that you can succeed on this, right? I think that 12 months from now, I think that your discipleship culture can be up and running and built. I think that you can have people who are finishing up a year's worth of discipleship. I believe that you can have more than one person who is making disciples. I believe that when you ask people what your church is about, that they'll start saying disciple making. All right? I think that that's really genuinely possible in the next 12 months of your life. I think that that's where it can be. And in 8 weeks, I can have you up and running. All right? So look for it, watch for it, be ready with your finger hovering over the button on that day because this is going out to 5,000 pastors. Reminder, recap, there's onboarding videos, there's weekly checklists, there's private Facebook group, there's weekly Zoom check-ins, there's unlimited email access, and all of that plus everything that New Start Discipleship already offers. Pay attention to your email because I'm actually going to give away some crazy bonuses, okay? I've signed copies of Carl Vader's book that I'm going to give away, and there's a whole bunch of it. So watch your email. It's going to get crazy. So here's my final pitch. What's all this worth? With all of those New Start tools and all of those launch bonuses, including sermon series, like 6 different sermon series that go along with all these modules, with all the New Start websites and printing license for all the resources, unlimited printing license, you can print as many copies as you want, and 200 mentoring videos and editing and annual video hosting that costs me hundreds of dollars, and New Start sermon series and Defending Your Faith course and 40 Days of Holiness, the website, and the 40 Days of Holiness sermon series and the prayer journal and the prayer series and the 40 Days of fasting campaign and the obedience challenge, the baptism challenge, moving from me to we, the gospel challenge. What do you think all of that is worth? If you were to add it all together, well, if I was to actually move there and come on staff at your church and develop all of it for you, it would take me a year at least working full time on nothing else. It would take me a year. And that would be $50,000. I've got 7 kids and you'd have to pay my housing allowance and the salary, right? It takes a lot of money to feed them. Now, $50,000 a year, don't worry, I'm not going to charge you $50,000 a year. But what if instead of $50,000 a year, you were to say, well, Daryl, I don't want you to move here. I just want you to do all that stuff for me. I'm going to outsource it to you, Daryl. Just develop these things for me, develop the pathway, do all the graphic design, do all the web design, do all the video editing, do all the website purchasing and the domain names and connect it all together and make the thing all happen for me. Well, okay, so if I was to do that, let's just put a number on all those things, even though, frankly, this is too small. But let's just imagine, and let's say $5,184, because that's the arbitrary values that I assign to all of those things, all right? What if that would be the price? Well, I'm not going to charge you $5,184. Don't worry, okay? Because I know if you're like me, you don't have that much money. Your church doesn't have that much money. So instead, how about $50 a month? Would that sound more reasonable? Like, okay, $50 a month for a complete system, plenty of extra preaching material, ability to help launch all of this. Would that sound more reasonable? Well, that's what I currently charge. Literally, right now, you can go get just the New Start Discipleship System all by itself for $50 a month. If you work that out 12 months at a time, that's $600 a year. So at $600 a year, what do you think? Would that be a fair price? What if I was to take all of that I just showed you and then add in all of the coaching resources that we just talked about? All of the unlimited email access and Zoom check-ins and weekly checklists and the private Facebook group and the I said email access already, onboarding videos and all of that stuff. What if I added it all together and put it all in one package so both things were together? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm probably crazy, but I want to give it to you at no extra charge. In fact, I want to give it to you for $100 off of what you would pay if you were to pay monthly. Okay, so instead of being $50,000 for me to come there and do it, instead of being $5,000 for me to do it all custom for your church, instead of all that, what if I did all of it, and instead of being $50 a month at $600, what if I did $500 annual a year and made that the entire thing? But here's the thing. If I'm going to do that, I have to shut it down. I have to work this thing for a while. I've got to serve you and serve your church, but you got to pull the trigger, because if you don't pull the trigger, then I'm not going to be able, I'm going to shut down New Start sales for a while, and it's not going to be available. So that's my closing pitch. I hope that you will pull the trigger, and instead of circling the airfield and buzzing the ramp of the runway one more time, instead of being like, oh, no, let's circle around, let's waste 4 months trying to figure out and be frustrated about my discipleship process. Instead of doing that, why don't you make the decision, I'm done with this being sick and tired. I'm done with the frustration. I'm ready to put something in place that's going to make a difference and measure success like God measures success instead of just attendance at the meeting. I want to see how many disciples I can make. That's my pitch to you. It's coming up, opening up at 7 a.m. Central on Tuesday. Don't miss it. All right. Not tomorrow, but Monday, I have one more video. Okay. I'm going to be actually working through and doing a demonstration for you of how all of those New Start tools work. So I'll be literally showing you like, okay, here's how this works and here's how this looks. So watch out for that video on Monday. Card opens on Tuesday. I hope to see you there. God bless. Thanks a lot.